Então, muito boa tarde. Estaremos a começar. Moderei para inglês. So, it's a pleasure to be here. Let me try not to use too much time because I think we can interact, perhaps in the end. I would like to start by saying that I would like to dedicate this theme to two persons. And in the end, I would like to thank two persons as well. So let me start by saying that I would like to dedicate this talk to Dr. Rui Cunha. It's a great honor to be inside this prestigious institution that they do so much for us all, Chinese and the Portuguese cultures, Portuguese-speaking cultures. And in the person of Dr. Rui Cunha, I also thank Engineer Rui Cunha and Dr. Filipe Guadalupe. I would like also to dedicate this talk to Engineer Carlos Roldão, which is a big honor, a tremendous honor that he is in the crowd as a pioneer in the shaping of communications technology. An example that from the tiny territory of Macau, new templates can be developed. So, I am about to start a talk regarding this broad theme of electronic communications, and I would like to walk us through some thoughts. And these thoughts have to do with three major topics. The first one has to do with this latest wave of mobile communications that we heard a lot, 5G. At some point in time, this was the talk of the day. And then my second topic is about digital platforms, because at a certain point, the talk of the day was the metaverse. We seem to have forgotten this. And now for artificial intelligence as the latest focus of our attention. To talk about 5G is a bit risky because we can be very trivializing. We can actually put forward a number of commonplaces. So let me try to avoid it, although I have to set the stage for what brought us here. Somewhat like a pulse, every 10 years we have the breakout of a new mobile generation of systems. So the first one in the early 70s was introduced into the marketplace in Japan. It was not a success, was analogic mobile telephony. But as we made the transition to the 90s, there was this event that basically was achieved in Europe that was a new set of protocols enabling very easy with open technology in interfaces between mobile phones. The 2G with the GSM standard was in fact something that coincided with the fall of the Berlin Wall, with the onslaught of globalization, and with a new paradigm in terms of mobility in society. It was so revelatory, that potential, that by the end of the 2000s, with the notion of internet already very popular, the third generation was actually promising a lot. And there was a lot of hype behind the introduction of 3G. But at the same time that this hype was deflated, so so that many auctions were in fact financial successes but operational failures in terms of the expectations. At the same time, around the year 2000, there was this dot-com bubble burst. And I saw it, I was there in London when many people from the city of London in fact had very interesting and bizarre schemes of putting internet everywhere, much beyond what the infrastructure of many countries could withstand. But around the year 2000, something happened that was quite successful. The 4G generation with the LTE set of protocols came in a moment in which we had new developments at the technology level, especially at the terminal level with the introduction of the smartphone. And in fact, new mobile business models were developed by like Uber or others like Airbnb that captured the essence of the day. So with broadband, because internet, people could now basically consume the internet where they were. And this enabled some sort of new spontaneity in terms of usage. Again, around the year 2000, the 5G system was introduced, and so far we have not seen the killer application. So what really is interesting, and what can we do with 5G? And I know this, for instance, when I talk with friends of mine from South Korea, where they first introduced 5G, and now and again I call them, look, Kim, my friend is called Kim from South Korea. So look, Kim, is there anything going on right now? And he said, oh, don't tell it aloud, but so far we have not seen any really monetization possibilities coming on from 5G. And those were the first to introduce and to start learning. Well, the technology really promising is really promising in terms of performance, of data transfer, and the immediacy of returns from impulses between devices. We had a number of big auctions in the world. The Portuguese auction was the greatest, very huge for our standards, but even in terms of the types of variety of frequencies that we auctioned. In Brazil, it coincided at the same time. We were among the last ones, but in fact, these two countries have been really fast after the introduction in terms of deployment and take-up by individuals. And if we take the broad landscape, in fact, it's Asia that still has the lead in terms of diffusion of the technology, followed by North America and last Europe, just to think about the Northern Hemisphere, right? There are a number of other issues that I would like to put in the margins of our attention. First was that, in fact, there was a sort of social backlash in the beginning. So I remember having talks with other regulators, with the president of an important regulator in Europe, a great friend from Belgium, the president of the regulator from Belgium, and he was very scared. He was very concerned about the movement of burning 5G towers, of people just destroying them. And even in Brazil, having talks with the Brazilian colleagues, because some people just take down one of those towers because they were afraid of the electromagnetic fields, because in fact they thought that in the social media they were talking about 5G propagating COVID. So all of these things were going on, and anxiety was in fact in the population. Cybersecurity became a matter Before it was not a matter, and with cybersecurity there was for the first time singling out of particular vendors. The other novelty was not in the front office of this business, was in the back office of this business, because with the need for more densification of antennas, it would not be feasible to have antennas everywhere or with masts and towers. And then the whole idea of sharing the same tower or mast with different antennas belonging to different providers, this became a way to save money. This was something that was also appreciated by municipalities. And a new business stemmed from this, in the sense that new specialist real estate services providers, the tower owners, the tower co's, started to, in fact, come to the market, and sometimes making big movements in Europe, for instance, but also in the United States. So the business model is still to be found. The promising idea was to make out of this an industrial internet. And of course, 5G is not alone in terms of technology. We have other technologies, other possibilities, some of them quite attractive, like Wi-Fi 6. So the fact that we could actually have many devices connected in a small perimeter, and this could be a way to allow for the industrial internet. As myself, were many times talking with engineers from the Portuguese regulator, many times I was feeling that they were coming from international meetings with a lot of rhetoric. They were in fact talking about these concepts like telemedicine, like automated mobility. But how can I touch this? Where can I see this? Where are the first actual attempts to roll out these new propositions? And I could not see them. And I asked them, well, so get back, and next time you please make some more pointed questions and see the agenda from another side. I decided to take the matter into my own hands. At some point, I decided to get the data for myself. And for this, I was lucky enough to have a number of friends, some Portuguese that are data scientist specialists, a friend from the Brazilian regulator, an outstanding global regulator, I must say, Anatel, perhaps the best in the world, if I may say, and the former president of the Polish regulator, and a colleague that was member of the board of the Italian regulator. We decided to take the matter into our own hands and see where did this technology come from, so that we could understand the trajectories and those constellation of factors that will be defining the materialization of value from the technology. So let me just bother you with some graphs. The data is quite simple. It had not been used before. The data was technical and scientific publications on 5G. We got them all. Those published in frontier journals, those that were peer-reviewed. We took this as our source for a sample. Actually, our sample is the whole population, defined in our own way. Yeah, it's not the whole knowledge, it's the population of those pieces, those items of contributions. So we have the number of publications on 5G here, and it rises after the year 2014. This notion was not clear before we published this in the leading journal, international journal on this matter, which is called Telecommunications Policy. So there is a takeoff a few years after the operational deployment of 4G. So by 2015, we are on the exponential curve already. The interesting matter is that the colored symbol over there tells you, well, when it turns red, it's because we had the takeoff. But what is that variable on the right-hand side chart? The colored dots are the number of countries where the authors come from. There is, let me put it this way to be simple, there is a democratization of know-how. The number of countries is quite amazing. We get above 100 in little time, in fact. On the right, never mind, is just an indicator of evenness of the country's share in terms of leading the technology. The major observation being that this technology is not monopolized by the few and the powerful. It was actually something that was participated. This technology from the outset was quite participated. Who did the hard work? So China is the country with more contributions to the stock of knowledge. This is just the amount of total publications during our time frame, basically 10 years more. But it's followed by the US. And then you see some other countries, including European countries. So of course, China is big. If I would correct this indicator by the size of the country, so normalizing by population, of course, we will see a different picture. We will see the Nordic countries coming out in the lead because they produce a lot for the tiny population they have. But this is absolute numbers. This is what we have as an absolute impact in the technology market. Well, if you know what is a scientific paper, like our own scientific paper, you saw that besides Portuguese authors, when I presented the first page of my paper, you could see an author from Brazil, an author from Poland, an author from Italy. We are linked because of this paper. So what happens if I compute all the papers and I project a graph with the linkages and the size of the contribution being the circle and the connections being the partnerships? We find out that there are three major clusters, three broad sets of countries that tend to work together. There is no bigger partnership for pushing the 5G forward than China and US. In absolute numbers, they lead. In terms of co-authorships, they lead. As we know from our experience, especially technical experience, having arrived here, these complex technologies are always teamwork. In the sense they are a project of humanity, right? Of communities of practice, of knowledge networks. If you try to disrupt this pattern of cooperation, the prediction is easy. The progress will be slowed down. Maybe fragmentation will be installed at a great loss, since cooperation and standard setting has been one way to configure the final arrangements of the technology? Well, there is in red a sort of, so these are the lead countries in blue, sort of very super powerhouses. Yeah. In red you have basically the European countries. In green you have a third very interesting group of countries. What are the, just let me focus on the green ones. We call them the non-aligned countries, if this terminology is familiar from other geopolitical ages. So who are they? Turkey, Pakistan, India, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, all contributing. Countries that don't have their equipment industry for some reason. They are contributing to this league. And because the way we define the sample, this is actually the Champions League. Because in order to publish at that level, you have to suffer a lot. We had to suffer in attempting to publish our paper. We had some nasty reviews, actually. So it's part of the game. They were able to survive. And what can we learn if we inquire their profile? So let me just start with India, and then I'll go to Saudi Arabia. So India, when an Indian author publishes, and these are technical papers, right? Many times they are extremely applied. They describe designs of antennas, they describe ways to virtualize the network. They are actually very technology oriented. They are not ivory tower stuff. This is engineering stuff. But it's much better to use publications and patents. Patents, Zhuanli, in Chinese, patents are less in number. So here we have a greater volume of empirical material. So Indians, when they publish with their Indian colleagues. So India, the largest bar over there, means that they publish a lot among themselves, especially among themselves. Then they publish with the United States, and then with Chinese authors. Let me jump to Saudi Arabia. When the Saudis, or when researchers and engineers in Saudi Arabia publish, they tend to publish first with Chinese experts. Yeah? And then they have it both ways, haven't they? They publish with the Chinese and then with the North Americans, with the Americans. Yeah? And this, I think, tells you something about recent developments in the Arabian region, right? So they don't come from nowhere. There are other currents of communication going on among the technical staff. There is something called scientific diplomacy. There is something called technological diplomacy. And there is something called regulatory diplomacy. So this is the storyline about 5G. Now let's talk about something completely different. So the digital world of platforms. So for much time we talked about the information society, but then we realized that was not enough as a concept. Perhaps it was a network economy. And basically now we have data ecosystems, because the internet changed from an open field just that we just browsed to a bubbled ecosystem in which we live inside platforms, and we use them for a number of purposes. These platforms are brought about by enormous players with expansive capabilities and very deep resources, very deep pockets, and usually they have significant gatekeeping leverage. And I'm twisting some formal regulatory jargon just to be out of the regulatory sphere, because I'm here in the personal capacity as somebody that tries to study this. And in fact, these platforms are not just about abstract things, zeros and ones. They are sometimes very tangible in the investments they make. So on the other side of the world, who are the players that are installing, owning, running, managing submarine cables? Who are they? They are household names. They are the same companies that in our mobile phone we make a search, we make a phone call. These are the big players that in fact have been very active under the radar, underwater. Just to give an example that they have physical resources that are quite significant also. By using one of those very popular search engines, I just put digital platforms, and this is the output if I look for books and I call for the images. A number of books have for us the suggestion that these big players are of big concern for many people. So just look at some titles like The Tyranny of Big Tech or Digital Dominance and other titles. So there is something going on about the big power of these players, and with big power, we are unsure if they keep their big responsibility. And then we have the attempts of corralling these technological manifestations. Yeah, we have a jungle of proposals, and let us just take the European example, and it will be fastidious just to use the acronyms. I would spend some time just by mentioning the acronyms. But in fact, we have a number of attempts in the region that sometimes thinks that can provide examples for the rest of the world about how to regulate, how to govern technology. So I will not go into these details. This will consume too much time. But the point is that we have overlapping technologies. Sometimes some have to do with governance of personal data, the Data Act, or corporate machine-to-machine data, like the Data Governance Act, coming from the European Union. And this is just the latest wave, because in the early 2000s we had other attempts at regulation. So let me jump to the last mile. So AI, I noticed that many people want to discuss AI. I think we know little about it, and those that know a lot are coming to the public sphere, emitting signals that we should all be concerned. Yeah, the defect of my profession, which is, to teach at university, is that I feel comfortable if I come up with sort of organizational setup to make sense of this phenomena in my own mind. Because if I cannot express it, it's because I cannot understand it. Yeah? So with the introduction of the microchip in '72 by Intel Corporation, we can say that we had a number of economic problems that the solution was to electronify it. We have a problem, let's electronify the solution. And in fact, the devices could now be very small. They could be miniaturized. And the Japanese were quite talented at the mechatronics trade, like a Walkman. Yeah, we have a digital electronic product, yeah, but with mechanics. And to make it very small, with different components not interfering with each other, is some sort of precision mechanics that they really prospered. So by the early 80s, the Americans were quite concerned because they were good in selling cars that would not break down, that will not consume much gasoline, and they also were good in electronic appliances and personal items for utility. Then in the 80s, the thing was informatization. That was the word of the day. We would informatize everything. If we had a problem, we would informatize it. Yeah. So things could now become paperless. And in the 90s, we had the possibility that computers that would do the informatization for us could now be connected and be in the big worldwide network. So if we had a problem, we now would internetify the solution. In the early 2000s, the idea was to cloudify the solution almost to every problem, because now we have the problem in handling the huge load of data. And it would be now expensive even to process this data. If we could outsource this could be useful for us as a firm, for instance. And then in the 2010s, the business model was clear: platformization. Everything we could think about could be now platformized. We want to rent a room, platformize the solution. We want to take a ride in a taxi, let's platformize the solution. And maybe this is one way to provide a framework to this decade. It's a decade of intelligentification. Sensors are now smartening up. Everything could have its own computational power at the edges. And we could, in fact, see that the implications are tremendous. Because if the objects themselves can now add value by becoming a service, things as a service, now we are talking about a different level. And this is the stage, I think, that we could think each other to be living in. Of course, these needs massive capital and stocks of know-how. It means that, of course, we need now even more powerful processing capacity, and semiconductors being so critical, especially for applications like quantum computing, for instance. The AI solutions can be multi-purpose. GPT, in the sense of general purpose technology, they can be used for everything. They can be used for automatizing a number of rational processes, algorithms, but they could also be mock-ups for emotional products like arts and expression products. So they are quite cross-sectional. Standards are key. I myself have been asked about, in the personal capacity, of course, entering the whole debate of standardization in AI. It's an interesting way to approach AI standards. It sometimes helps us to avoid the next big word, which is ethics. It's difficult to talk about ethics these days without overly politicizing this conversation too much. And then, of course, the whole business of regulation, which is to connect the technology potential with the usage needs and the common good. Illustrations. This was yesterday's front page in The Guardian, in which an artist, photographer, assumes that he basically asked for AI to generate fake picture because he won a prize. Then we have other data points like Italy banning ChatGPT. That's sort of hardcore regulation, yeah. Then in the center, this is just the feed of news on the Financial Times having to do with artificial intelligence. You just go through it. It's very, very small characters, but if you go through it, you see everything. Of course, Elon Musk should be there for contradictory messages that he has been personifying recently. We, of course, have ChatGPT, and we have others. The other column is a website that ranks the capability of large language models. The first one was launched, the number one, ChatGPT version 4 was launched last month in March. Look at the last one, was ChatGPT version 3.5, launched in November. From November until now, they kept the lead, but look at the number of other alternatives that just inserted themselves in the middle. Just a metric of tremendous advance changes going on. On the other side, you see a mechanism offering using artificial intelligence, a company from Macau that wants to mine the legal corpus, to intelligentify what we can extract from it. It's going on in Macau for some time now. Of course, now they can even plug into the big engines that are already available in an open, what is it? Battery is running low. Fortunately, I'm finishing almost. Can we kill this window? And the last one is just to say that, oh, disappeared. Fortunately, it was almost the last slide. Oh, nice. So the last one is just a news. I could not find a news item, but I got it from Google, the confirmation that ChatGPT is unavailable in China. Did the Chinese authorities ban ChatGPT, or did ChatGPT self-ban the technology from a number of countries? Curiously, some countries like China, that have one specific kind of political regime, but not others with similar, regimes like Vietnam that are not, for some reason, listed. Curious discrimination. And for this slide, so this is now approaching the end, so I'm going to make one first thanks to Angus Cheong, the engineer, the man behind the Law Miner. He has, actually, I brought one, I think, did I brought it? Maybe not. So I had no, unfortunately not. I had a report that he has been publishing in Macau for over 20 years about the state of internet usage in Macau. So it's very interesting public good that is coming from Macau for the welfare of Macau people. So just to give an example of somebody from the territory that is also a pioneer. We have some pioneers around. To finish, so just to prompt you, which is a word from AI, isn't it? Into some final thoughts. Indeed, the tangibles matter, like semiconductors, like submarine cables. New players are, remember 5G, are actually active. The global south is active. The non-aligned, as we mentioned, are contesting the ground. This is not to be a monopoly. they want to have a piece of the action. They have their own endogenous know-how to contribute, and this is already a hope that they can decode what is going on. Only if you know, you can understand. To absorb is very expensive. You need to build up your own knowledge profile. This takes time. It's not from the shelf. You cannot buy it. You have to build it. Then, combinations of technologies and institutions has been a trend in techno-economic history. There is always this mismatch that technology runs ahead, and then we have social solutions to encapsulate the technology into something that is working for a new social context, because the context will change. Then automation of knowledge generation is presenting some pressures, especially to services, to lawyers, to medical doctors, to programmers, to content producers. Yeah. So in the end, if I have something that generates text for me or images, if I needed one person to come up with the idea or the research question, and then I will need 8 to actually produce it, and then I will need a 10th person to control the quality, maybe these 8 persons in the middle will be very much under pressure, because these processes, sometimes laborious and attention-consuming, could be economized. And as happened in the past, this will create issues related to occupation, to employment, to lifestyles. But if we think about an author can produce a piece of text just in seconds by asking ChatGPT, for instance. But yet you need a question, you need an idea, you need a prompt. And in the end, you cannot rely on the technology. You have to validate it, you have to confirm it, assess the quality. And these are added value tasks. But if this is the scenario, for instance, what does it mean? The author becomes an editor. And this is just an example, possible scenario, of a redefinition of professions. Yeah, and the take-up message could be that innovation and regulation have indeed to go hand in hand. Finally, I would like to ask you for attention, because I need to thank Ana Silverio Marques. I don't have my glasses. Ana Damskita, also known, because she introduced me to the Fundação and to Filipa, and she prompted me into making the PowerPoint, because maybe it could be useful. I think she was right again. So thank you for the help, the support, and for the attention. Maybe I'll let this. Not sure if we are going to have debate. We can.
Thank you. You shared with us interesting observation that with the antennas, some of the real estate agents are coming forth, and they're sort of happy to share the towers, right, for the antennas. Could you tell a little bit more how these kind of conflicts are being resolved, maybe in Portugal, in Europe? I just know one of the conflicts that rose some time ago in historical village of Monsanto, where there was a public protest against an antenna. So please, could you tell us a little bit more, if there is anything on that?
All right. Should I just provide some quick reaction. So maybe two things are conflated in what you say. First is the all new business of tower codes. Yeah. So many operators in Portugal, they owned the towers in which they nested the antennas. So sometimes you are on the highway and you see 3 antennas and the 3 are for the same operator. They have 3 masts, 3 little houses for power. They have a duplication or triplication of assets. What happened was that companies that perhaps needed to invest in 5G, including having the licenses for the spectrum needed in 700 megahertz, 3.5 gigas, expensive because these were in high demand. These companies could sell out, right, these towers to make some cash to those interested, that will be specialists, new players. And in fact, now we have 2 players in Portugal that are basically focused on selling the services of those assets. So now in a mast, you may have 3 types of antennas from 3 operators. Or you see a new entrant coming with purchased rights of spectrum. Now, maybe this operator does not need to accommodate the capital cost of building its own infrastructure of towers, physical infrastructure. It can now exchange CapEx for OpEx, and now, of course, it will be a more smooth entry into the market. So that's one thing. Another thing is, what is that tower doing there? Beaming nasty emissions in my face with this new strange pioneering technology that we know little, yeah? And of course, around the year 2000, we forgot this now. But there were also reactions in the public. There were sometimes, still today, you know, there is a mast near an high school, secondary school. And perhaps the parents get together and they make a petition to tear down this tower, yeah, or move it away, yeah. And of course you have then conflicts of interest because, in the sense that you want to have wireless communications, but you don't have the tolerance for the risk, yeah. Of course. How to solve it? This was an important step, I think it was given in Portugal, that was to produce a new set of reports going to the ground and actually examine the emissions, electromagnetic emissions coming. From the get-go, at the experimental stage, when the first antennas were put there, not for commercial purposes, but for, trials. Yeah? The regulator did this. And then it was extremely transparent and I think even innovative in the way it was communicating this information. Showing, here is the results of the analysis. But this is not enough, you know. If you just do like this, check about this formula, many people can't grasp it. You are fooling people. No, throwing information at people is not actually engaging them. You have to engage them. Yeah? You have to show, to demonstrate that you are open to consideration and debate. So I think that we did not have what we saw in the rest of Europe, like burning towers, towers being crashed. We didn't see this for many reasons, but one thing I tell you, the authorities were active in accommodating the social listening duties. that come with this obligation to regulate. So supervision has to be smarter. And this was part of what we did.
Thank you.
If I have something else, it seems to me that 5G also, the issue of the antennas is also an issue of the number of antennas are far more than before. So this means that economically it was not so much correct to start to spread so many antennas all over the country or over the places. In this case, it starts to make sense also to integrate and one tower to be shared by different operators. This is one issue. Regarding the radio frequency hazards, I will not take position, but I can tell you that, as you know, I have the office in the ISCTE, and my windows were protected by persianas of all metallic. So I was not receiving any radiation coming from the set of antennas that are surrounding the ISCTE because I separate myself from the radiation from these kind of persianas that were metallic. So, but I don't take any position about if it's good or if it's not good, okay?
Yeah. So let me take a position. The position I want to take is to give proper consideration to social anxiety. Yeah? That this is not irrational. I think it's irrational to discount the perception of risk. Yeah? So with technology, I know, I mean, risk is embedded into technology. There is no such thing as risk-free technology. Yeah? So the first report we did on this matter of the radiations, yeah, it had the cover. You can see it on the web. The cover was having 5G and then a sort of beams coming out of it in yellow, like the sun. If you don't like radiation, you don't like life on planet Earth. We have to live with it. We have to live with the fact that if you are too much exposed to the sun, you are sunburned. So we have to control and manage risk. Management of risk is the topic here. And of course, to manage risk, we have to manage in a good sense, the social conversation. We must, I mean, the authorities have to be engaged in the social conversation. They cannot remove themselves and be aloof because they are too important to deal with these threads of, you know, viral ideas that can spread. Yeah, you have to be there, and you have to be present. You are part of the system, not outside of the system, as a regulator. And yeah, the tower business is fascinating because, of course, in this case, from a competition point of view, if we have a tower owner that wants to sell places, you know, the tower owner wants to get tenants. The more, the better. That means he has the owner has an incentive to be neutral. Neutrality, from this point of view, is what I want to hear from the regulatory position. It's what the antitrust authority wants to hear from a competition position. Yeah? So it was an interesting development of, we would say in economics, vertical disintegration, which is not risk-free, because those assets belonging to the operators, they are under the rules of telecommunications law. aren't they? But if they are removed, because the perimeter of the organization changed, the towers are in the same place. But if the perimeter of the MNO, right, the mobile network operator, shrinks, now the towers, very interesting, isn't it, are not under the usual regulation on which we relied that the operators knew they were under. So vertical disintegration is not neutral in terms of the actual responsibilities that come with the running of the masts and towers. So that's interesting development. That's why I think it's fascinating, among other things.
Okay, just to ask one question. Given the natural conflict between regulation and innovation, okay, because the innovation is always much faster than regulation, how can you see it that those things go hand in hand? I don't see it. How is it possible in short terms? Thank you.
What do they say when somebody feels that just got a nasty question? People say, thank you for making that question. So thank you very much, Pedro, for putting on the hot seat. So let me address the question with an example, if I may. Yeah? Again, drawing from the Portuguese experience. There is now a new initiative going on in Portugal. We call it Zonas Livres Tecnológicas, that could translate as free technology zones, in which, I mean, I don't like the English terminology, which is regulatory sandboxes. So for those in the know, that is a regulatory sandbox is a place in which you can play with toys without being under the oppressive supervision and enforcement power of the regulator. You are in this contained space, you are freer to experiment. So we have this in Portugal, and I must say, we should be quite proud in Portugal to say that the first free technology zone was actually launched by the Portuguese Navy. Another Portuguese pioneering institution, by the way. So they are very much dynamics leaning. They harbor lots of knowledge in a variety of ways. And in fact, in the off Setúbal, in the Troia Peninsula, in which they had a small base that was not used, they repurposed the base to be this sort of regulatory bubble. And this was set up in close partnership with the communications regulator. Just to say that other such zones are predicted to be on the rollout, and for them we can envision electricity or power, innovation, financial gadgets, for payments. A new set of possibilities for a variety of sectors. Now, what have been going on there? You can check if you want just by putting Zona Livre Tecnológica Portugal or put Portuguese Navy, Marinha. And you see that they have been using the concept. So they were doing it before they had the recognition in the Diário da República, where the bylaws and where the laws are published, that they were granted the status. they were already doing once a year in September trials, calling many other navies from many countries to trial out their drones. So drones has been the focus point of these people, and these drones are underwater, surface, and aerial drones. And they can be actually military, they can be just logistics. And there we have a situation in which we have the equipment manufacturers. These are private companies. You have the lead users, which are the different navies. And you have in the control building, in which you have all the sensors being monitored and everything, because we have all the Americans are by far having the largest market share of the seats. They have many staff, lots of screens, then the British, and then other navies. But the regulator is there, because the regulator is the guardian of radio spectrum. And these drones are there because they are going to do something for you, but they need instructions, they give to send news to you, they need to be controlled, you have to know where they are, they need to talk with other objects, moving objects, not moving objects, and the regulator is there. So of course, a simple thing you have to do is to allocate frequencies. You have to allocate frequencies because, I mean, if one robot boat, is having one communications transmissions in one frequency, but then you have an aerial drone also, they interfere, they can crash. Yeah, so you cannot, you have to make the spectrum tidy. So this allocation is going on, yeah? And we are innovated in that. So first we were just giving a spectrum, the airwaves almost take it as you come. But then we developed the technical stuff of the regulator developed a new tool for automatizing a great deal of this work. Yeah, so we are innovating because we are there. We are submitting ourselves to some challenges. And with some challenges, we have to learn. Yeah, so you are on the move. You need to be on the move. So this puts the regulator on its toes. You have to be fast on your feet. Wake up, wake up. And then, of course, we are there. We see. We talk. There is a Navy officer with his hands in his head. Oh my God, there is a problem. And he's going to talk with another Navy officer from a larger country. Like going to the mama. And he was stopped by a technician from the regulator. Look, you have a problem, talk to me. Yeah? And then you learn what is the issue, and then actually the problem was solved. So this is one way in which the regulator is very close to innovation, and you are almost synchronizing with innovation. Yeah? You may argue, oh, this is a very limited example, but at least I supplied one. And this could be also inspiring for, I mean, other navies are very jealous of the Portuguese Navy because they now realize more and more the full potential of that new area, which is beautiful, and the properties are fantastic. Yeah? So, of course, what happens is that we have put ourselves in the center of the action. If you are in the center of the action, you have faster learning loops. You are on the move. You are not afraid of technology. You are treating technology in the eye. Because sometimes, I mean, if you blink, you lose it, yeah? So you have to keep it close. You have to keep it close. There is no way to stop AI. Let's stop AI for 6 months. Let's stop democracy for 6 months. Let's stop, other things for 6 months. That's what he said.
6 months.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
I listened also to what he said.
Yeah, but
I didn't
your take
listen to what he wanted.
of course. What's your take on that?
Well, I think, I think we live in a, some people said a lot that, we are going into the information society. And then, maybe it's knowledge society. And sometimes we find ourselves with so much disinformation that we live in the bullshit society. Yeah? I mean, the bullshit ratio to actual reality is very big, huh? Very big ratio. So I don't know what it means. I don't know what he wants. I know what he said. I don't, and many people don't read the full statement. And what are the other authors? They just focus on these sort of superstar, tech superstar, yeah? Because he was elevated to some sort of tech Trump, yeah? And it produces content, yeah? It makes the wheels of media spin, yeah? And that's a monetization in itself. It's so I don't know what it means. I cannot pay attention to all the messages at the same time, but I assume there is lots of noise. At the same time, we have signals. So the code is different. I mean, you can say this just to stop competition. Don't do that. We have in Portuguese a saying for that, no? Armas são verdes, right? Don't do that, it's not good. Don't do that. And then you take it after slowing down the competition, so I don't know. Because on a few days later, he announced that he is going to have a new, come on. Now your truth is better than the other truth. So we have competing truths. That's an interesting concept. So I don't know, but to be honest, I didn't pay close attention.
Small comment, actually.
And it was a blip, huh? It dominated the conversation for some time.
Actually, my question has to do with the title of your talk, which is quite appealing, especially for us that work in this industry. 5G and AI, very topical. And I was expecting, actually, and I'm sure you could stay here longer, talk about it, and then talk about what actually 5G and AI, how do they dovetail in terms of, you mentioned that's not a killer application yet for 5G, which is, I totally agree with you, especially for consumer. Although on the industrial basis, we have a lot of use cases that are very impressive across the world, as you know, probably better than I do. But for consumer, it's more speed, less latency, can play games, can
faster cut videos.
Faster. But actually, there's nothing that we can do that we can't do with 4G, for example. But when we talk about 5G and AI, there's a totally new field of exploration, and I'm thinking about ways of further monetizing 5G using AI products. Our company is doing that currently. We are focusing our investment on obviously trying to monetize our 5G network, which you have on the ground for some time in Macau. You might know that the licenses took some time to come out. So we have a 5G network totally built on the ground for more than 2 years until we were licensed to start using it. And now we are also investing in the AI platform. And this part, I would like to listen a bit from you, because you talk about AI on the global basis, but you miss China in terms of development of AI. So Baidu is probably the biggest force in AI worldwide. And their platform is probably one of the greatest competitors to the developer of ChatGPT, for example. China now is, and this is your field, is thinking of regulating AI so that they can somehow control not only the outcome of AI, but how it develops and how it builds, so that perhaps it's too harsh to say this is politically correct, the outcome of AI. So I believe the regulators in China, especially the cyber administration, will start looking at it and very seriously regulate AI. But back to the question is, do you see any potential in 5G, cloud, and AI in terms of products that the consumers and the companies can really use, rather than just being at the conceptual stage? In Macau, we're thinking about products for security, like in China, actually, using the AI to manage the millions of CCTV cameras that populate the entire territory of China and Macau. Macau, they are ubiquitous. You can't go anywhere without a camera. So there's a huge amount of data. Big data also missing in the talk. It's part of the equation. 5G, AI, clouds, and processing capacity. All this together is explosive. So I believe this is going to bring transformations that we can't fathom at this point in time. So when I start by the title of your talk is that you talk about 5G, how we reach there. Briefly, you talk about AI, but you do not talk about how all this goes together.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, can you do it now in 2 minutes?
I don't think so. The strategy here was to keep it minimalistic, without trying to do forecasting. So I think what I tried to do was to do some foresight. So to establish a number of principles that would allow us to think as we move forward. So a few comments. Let me start by saying about the initiatives by some countries or collections of countries to control AI. Yeah, China, control AI. Europe, also control AI. You cannot say that if one controls it's ethical, the other control is political. Can we see the dividing line? It's not clear. What do you mean? Then it's a question of charging the words in a particular heavy way. The usage of AI, for sure, in the process. I mean, to embed AI in the optimization of energy use in the antennas. Yeah? So many times in the technology, innovation styles of development, we see that for sure there are combinations, and the combinations are unpredictable. Depends on what happens on the ground. With much reaction from the consumer that we don't know exactly how it will react. But we know that sometimes disruptive technology starts by entering the process. So in the beginning, without standalone 5G, maybe you have AI entering in the process by fine-tuning the communication, the splits of the signals, the energy stress, right? And that's already useful, and that's incremental innovation in the process, which is different from trying to anticipate what is a radical innovation in terms of product. For use cases, I saw a report by the Belgium regulator, wonderful report, some time ago. I'm not sure if, I mean, it was for sure 2022. But it's available. I can point you in that direction if it's useful. There you have a menu of use cases, and they have a few Portuguese. Yeah. Sometimes they are sort of blueprints. So they are, maybe you can say, many of them are wishful thinking. I know the promise. I have seen the slides. I know what the vendors are trying to convince the operators or trying to convince the regulator. That was actually the start of my own work on 5G. To go back to the original raw material and do the empirics myself. Because I had lots of talk and little action. So in terms of the 5G and AI, you could not see the connection, for instance, in our literature. That's very simple. I mean, we are dealing with big data. We had more than 10,000 articles to process, and we went through the wordage. Yeah, so we defined the sample in a very precise way. So actually, it's the sample, it's a piece, it's an extract of knowledge produced. Only the knowledge that was produced and published, so it's an indicator, it's not a metric, produced in English in peer-reviewed international indexed journals. That's why I call it the Champions League of knowledge claims. If you have succeeded there, you have to prove, right, that it's above some quality threshold in order to publish. Yeah? I could not see any overlap between AI and 5G, and that's not me talking; it's the experts. Yeah, but that was in the first phase of 5G, where the system itself was being built, the system as a whole. But now I think we, of course, will go into a new phase. You are going to be in a new phase in which standalone 5G will be the next thing. Yeah, and of course we are already in the road for 6G. You can see many alliances of research institutes being organized to pursue the 5G, the 6G goal, and if the rhythm will be the same, by 2030, something will be popping up. Even because, of course, all this institutional machinery of 3GPP and ETSI and ITU, they will set its own rhythm of pressuring for some developments, even because they will need spectrum and they will need to normalize, well, to harmonize the spectrum needs and all of this. So I think that in the short run, in terms of helping in programming, finding bugs, immediately self-correcting. There are some AI tools that are self-correcting. They can see their own failures, so they have this double loop already there. This is new. This is just breaking out now, just now. And this will accelerate learning by doing. Yeah, it will bring us more to the stage in which we have cleaned the desk so much that now we can deal with a new product, I think. But for that, I can still not envision what it could be. And this is from the 10,000 items of evidence, and this is by talking with my friend Kim. He has been in the head for a long time. So Kim is not giving me any news or good news. It's just flat news. So yeah, I'm also interested. I was not very persuaded by the content of the report. It's very nice and it's very useful, of the Belgium report, yeah, by the Belgium regulator. But I'm looking forward to go beyond the border gate and to enter China tomorrow and start seeing by myself what is going on. And as I go into mainland China, I'll start here in the direction of Guangzhou. I'll do a big tour and I will end in Shenzhen. By then, I should be seeing something. Yeah, and the buses on the streets with no drivers, on all of the things that were on the PowerPoints, but now are being actually implemented.
On 5G, I don't know, maybe people wants to go for dinner, but it'll be interesting to understand your view on the current turf between Huawei and the rest of the world in terms of technology, equipment technology, and deployment of their technology in across the world in several networks. Of course, there's a political view on this. There's a technological view on this. What's your take?
No comment, because I was involved. But I didn't get the way you phrase it. Huawei against the rest of the world? Is that what is going on? Because I don't see that. I don't see that. I see opposition, the logic of adversarialism being pushed. And I can anticipate the harm it will bring. The logic of adversarialism is new in mobile communications. Before it was the logic of cooperation. So this is new. The geopolitization of mobile telephony. This is new from the technological development stage. I mean, before market, pre-market. This is new. But of course, if you talk with many people from many geographies, you see that many people are relaxed about some vendors, and some people are not relaxed about other vendors. So I will definitely will not say that you have one side in which you have pure actors, and the other side in which you have impure actors. I will not live well with my conscience in that Disneyland world, yeah. And I really resist this framing, and I see this framing is sometimes getting traction, and I don't see actually the evidence for much of that. But of course, when you have new technology, you have the unknown, and you have, and that I spotted, the cybersecurity concerns being spotted. And of course, the cybersecurity concerns are for all, because if the networks are embedded in every detail in life, if you have malware injected in one part of the network, it may spread, and this spreads to actual infrastructures, objects of daily life, or of machine tools, everything. And this malware is also a business. Many people profit from malware. I have to say, if I have, as I had, companies addressing me, look, I'm a cybersecurity company, and there are a number of threats out there. Yeah, for sure. Defense against threats is good, but who is producing the threats? you know that those that are better in defending much of the time are are those that are good in the attacking, right? So the thing is, when I have companies talking to me about that, I know that's always a two-edged sword, because there is an old law in economics, which is the Say's law, is that says that the supply generates its own demand. If this is cynical enough to drive my point home. You see. So definitely, I see that this is a two-edged sword, double-faced God.
Professor Sandro Mendonça, how about AI regulation? What is happening in Portugal? What is happening in Europe?
Well, there is this public consultation on AI, at the European level, yeah, on the European level. And for instance, some of the components of these AI Act are sometimes, in a sense, trivial, that you should say that, for instance, using up proprietary informational material is problematic. Yeah? Drawing on proprietary informational material is problematic, because you have this content governance issue and copyright. This was actually one of the things in the early 2000s. Yeah, the Information Society, directive in Europe, because this copyright is at then it was just a click away. Yeah, you copy and paste. But now the AI needs to learn from and needs to train from huge loads of data. Who owns the data, and can you replicate this content? Yeah, so you have this intellectual property dimension to it, and this is one. That there are many others having to do with ARM, and I think that could be something that you will be addressing next week here at the foundation. Yeah, so instead of opening a new lab in my run around the table, I think that would be what I would like to say now. The Brazilians are addressing many of these problems. I would like to call your attention to what is going on in Brazil, having to do with digital regulation, and now also with AI regulation. Actually, we have very good proposals on the table on the Brazilian legislative process right now. Very considerate, very considerate. So if this is it, I would like to thank you again, and especially to Dr. Rui Cunha, who is now in the room, and through him, all of you that made this possible, and very generous of you. Thank you.